Okay.
Carol, do it. Let's let Carol kick us off.
And we're live.
Already live.
Are we live? We're live. Hello, everybody.
Now we're like, who's kicking us off?
I don't know.
Well, we just push go. We push go, and then what is it saying? We're fire ready, aim.
Fire ready. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's kick it off with an elevator scene.
Josh at his desk, his stand-up desk, which is now.
I do have a standing desk. I've been fucking around with that all day. Francis Ross had the question in the group about investors. I wanted to talk about investors for just a brief moment because I'm doing a video about partnerships in a yoga studio and what to have in place in your partnership and operation agreement and et cetera, et cetera. Investors are sort of a similar area of focus. They're more common than I think most people realize who don't have an investor yet. I was trying to go through just my mental records. I probably 15-20% of yoga studios have an investor behind the scenes. It's pretty high. What that looks like can be drastically different.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the reasons it's an important conversation is it's not uncommon for us to get asked, hence Francis's question, why, like, does anyone have information about how do I get an investor? Where do I get money? I want an investor. Should I get an investor? Who could be an investor? And it's an interesting question because often it's not the wrong question, but it's not the whole story. Someone's asking about investors because they're solving for something.
What's the problem they're solving for?
Yeah, like they're solving for something else and they've come up with that an investor is the solution to that problem. And I've experienced this personally in business too. So the first question when you're talking about investors all the time, if you don't have one yet, is why?
Why? Yeah.
Like what are you actually trying to solve? And the funny part is like 8 out of 10 times when we press that question, you don't need an there's no reason for it, actually. It's a different problem you're trying to solve. You think that it's a money problem often. And it often isn't, or at least not by itself. So
I think sometimes it could be, besides being a money problem, and Carol, you certainly had this advantage, is it's having maybe a partner, maybe someone that is in the partnership with you. And as I responded to her post, I was like, well, why do you want to have it? And then what do you want to get out of it? Because I also think every partnership is unique, and what the expectations are, how much involved what is it that you want this person to do? And is it maybe the questions you want someone to help with support, just be there supportively to bounce ideas off of, something like that. I don't know. That could be another.
Well, absolutely. To which I would say, then you're not looking for an investor,
right?
You're looking for a business partner, which is a totally different beast. An investor, in my mind, would be defined as someone who is investing money into the business. They then would have some level of ownership in the business, but they're most likely not operational. They may have some voting rights on big decisions or something, but they're unlikely to be operational. One of the biggest problems that we encounter is when that detail is not defined, because it's not, let's say that one of the studios in the past that we worked with, it was a partnership, and then they needed cash for some reason in an expansion moment. One of the partners went to a friend who was also a student, brought them in as an investor. They invested $300,000, something like that, in money, maybe a little bit more. And at the time, and this is usually how the story goes, the investor saying things like, I don't care. I just want to see you guys succeed. I just love this yoga. I just love you guys. I just want it to be good. But then when they came to us, they're 5 years later, the investor hasn't seen any return on their investment. They didn't have a predetermined payment plan or timeline for it. They didn't have, there wasn't a specific rate of the investment of what they were supposed to get back. It was like a 0%. Guy's just being nice. And I'm like, and look, I'm going to talk harsh about it, but like at this point, this is different. But no one fucking throws down. I don't care how much money you have. No one throws down 300,000 just into a business with no return on investment and no timeline involved who doesn't want anything. Something like there's
They
some
want
part of the
something.
story. They want something. They want a piece of the business. They want to feel good. They want street cred for it. They want a return, or they want to have sex with you. You know, like it's just there's something is fucking there. No, but it's true. It's
No,
true.
it's
It's
true. It's
true.
true. They want something. Absolutely, 100%. And I mentioned in the post in my response to her, I knew of a situation where someone did invest and none of that was defined, and the studio went belly up, and the investor lost over $100,000.
Yep.
And
I've seen that in 3 cases,
yeah, no,
like where they've lost like hundreds of thousands of dollars.
yeah, yeah. So I think it all comes down to, like we talked about, is what do you want, and have the agreement written out. I mean, that's basically life, right?
Yeah.
Everything's a transaction.
Yeah. I mean, people, when everyone's happy and things seem good and times are strong, no one think a handshake seems good enough. But it's when things are shitty, is when things get tough. It's when there's a curveball. It's when the economy goes down. It's when that's the moment where like you have to have a strong agreement in place. It keeps everything clean. It's about cleanliness of communication and expectations above all else.
And clarity of commitment, clarity of, all clarity of repayment, all of that stuff.
The other thing here is if you're taking on an investor, it's because you want money. So the question is, why take private money versus
Alone.
banked money, right? And often it's because you can't access the banked money. You can't access that. Although if you have a functioning business that has any history that's half decent, you should be able to access money. So you might need to look harder. And the reason I say that is it's interesting to me how often we'll encounter a studio that comes to us and says, well, I've got this private investor, they've given us this money at this rate, blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, so you asked them for an investment and you guys came up with a rate and that you couldn't get that at the bank? And they're like, well, no, they just offered to invest in the business and I thought I could use the money to do this thing. It's like the opportunity presented itself, so they took it, and they never even went to the bank, or they needed the money and they took it, but they never even went to the bank
To see what
to
they could get.
see what they could get. And here's the like hard part about that conversation. You're either doing that because you're naive, you're doing it because you're willingly ignorant, or you're doing it because you have some subconscious malicious intent. And this is a controversial take, I get it, but it's because you know that the bank will fuck you. They will take your business, your house, your car, whatever. Private investor, though, you might get away with it. Like things go sideways. What are they going to do? Sue you? I know that sounds terrible, but I'm telling you, we've seen this so many times.
Well, there's another part of that too, and I was
It's
in
weird.
this situation, is your credit's crap. You
Yes.
don't have good credit for whatever reason. And if you could get a loan from the bank, it might be a really high, if you can even get qualify, it might be at a super high interest rate. So
Right. Of course. Yeah. If you
there
can't
can,
get it or it's too high, then sure.
yeah.
That's a legitimate reason. I'm saying just the amount of occurrence where someone takes on investment and it's they don't there's no good reason for why they took private investment. And it's high. As I would say it's like 40% of the private investment situations. It's not they didn't go through they didn't do the real work to like figure out what the investment options were, because this also varies wildly country by country, even state by state. It's kind of insane. Like in Canada, to get a small business line of credit is relatively easy. So if you need investment for cash flow, like that's a really good thing to have. If you just need money for investment, like hard investment, then a term loan makes more sense. Anyways, what shakes out from this is if you don't have this all clarified, it's not uncommon. The two scenarios there's sort of like three negative scenarios that we see happen. One, what Terry's already mentioned, the investor ends up losing their money. And even if you're not the investor, whatever, but that's the risk that they take. But you got to sleep at night. Like it feels shitty. You already
Right.
feel shitty about your own business, and then you have to feel shitty about losing someone else's money. That's a tough place to be mentally. So that's sort of the super negative. The second one is the investor isn't getting their return. So then, even though they're not operational and they're not supposed to have influence on the direction of the business, 3 years down the road, they start butting in. They're like, I'm not getting my money back, and I don't think that you guys are doing a good job running the business. And they start coming in and operating or taking control of things or pushing themselves in, which makes things very tumultuous sometimes.
It's, it goes back to, it's like you said, everything's all fine and rosy. It's as soon as it's, sex and money. Those are the two problems that humans, when it comes to sex and money, when things go south, that's when problems start happening, right? And so, like you said, if you don't have it defined, they're going to start butting in, whether you want them to or not.
Yeah.
In this day and age, I just don't understand how people would borrow anything without clearly defined terms. Like that just what I don't know if it's just this yoga world thing or this happens elsewhere, but like it seems like I don't know, the handshake thing, just protect yourself,
Yeah.
like make sure everything's defined. If you're going to take an investor on, they need to know like what their role is, like you were saying, Terry. It's just, and like I wouldn't want anybody butting into how I'm running my business. Like if I needed cash, I would not go to somebody like, I don't know, just it's pretty wild out there, these stories.
Yeah.
It's kind of a positive testament to the larger industry that like this is a common enough we have all experienced this enough that we can have a conversation about it, which means it's a common enough circumstance, and so like how does that happen? People are so impassioned by what's happening at these studios that they're willing to give hundreds of thousands of dollars in investment in support of the studio on a handshake. Or, they write a contract down that says he owes me this money. So like legally it's there, but none of these other details are defined. And it's like, it doesn't matter. They're willing to do that on both sides. That's kind of a positive indicator. It just very often ends up in a negative place, I would say. The third element here that I think, and this is for any loan at all, but that's tricky to calculate. Often when someone's looking for an investment, they want the cash, they need the cash to do something.
Mm-hmm.
But the two things that I see happen is they haven't defined, do I need cash as cash flow? Like, is my problem a cash flow problem where I'm short every month to make the bills? So then you think about it like, why, if I have $100,000 investment, I'd have 100 G's in the bank, and that would, buffer me for 6 months of the deficit in expenses that I have, or something like that, or get me off my credit card debt, and then whatever. But you still have to fix the cash flow problem. So if that's the case, that's fine, but you have to figure out why are you negative cash flow?
Yeah.
Because then you're adding to it the repayment on the debt, which fucks your cash flow. So that's tricky. Same thing on the other side. If you just need it as like a one-time investment, let's say you're going to expand the business or something. Same thing. The calculation that's not made is how does this impact the cash flow? There should be a repayment plan as part of this. Generally speaking, there is. Or generally speaking, there isn't, but there should be, in which case, like cash flow is king when it comes to a studio. If you're suddenly paying $1,000 a month, $2,000 a month every month on top of everything else, like that might be your pay or the whole profit margin of the studio. So you actually compound the problem that you're having rather than fixing it. Not to say that it doesn't work. Yes, it can work as well. Best case scenario, you're expanding from like 2 to 3, 3 to 4 studios. You need a a big insertion of cash, you want to go outside of the bank because the terms are bad. You get backed by an angel investor, and the terms on that are that you don't have any repayment for a long period of time, 3 years, something like that. So you get the studio up and going, at which point they own a percentage of the business, and their repayment comes at exit or after X amount of time, percentage of profit. And that's the gamble that they're taking. That's the best scenario. The problem is there's not a lot of yoga studios that can support that from the investor's perspective. If it's a smart investor, they'll look at the numbers and won't want to give you the money for that because it's not the type of business it is. Not in some cases it is, but it's rare.
What do you do? You pose the question is
What?
if you're
What do you
really
do?
if it really is a cash influx, what are the options and what is the, like I say, because a lot of times in situations like that, what we see happen is they'll run like an annual sale and to bring in
Right.
an infusion of cash, which is not necessarily end of the world. It's just that you have to be very mindful of that, because then you're typically, we've talked about this bazillion times, but then typically most of the people, Carol, I think you would agree on this, and Josh, is usually people are buying annuals are your best monthly members. And so then you're giving up that monthly revenue. And I have a client that was in exactly this position and hasn't made up that monthly revenue difference. And now it's sort of become this cycle. So that's something to be very mindful of, is if you do a big annual sale and you do get this large influx of cash, is what's the plan to get those monthly members back, get new monthly so that your cash flow, like Josh said, isn't dropped by like $10,000 a month. That's a significant, but I mean, depending on the size of your studio, that's a significant amount of decreased cash flow. Just,
Yeah. That's the average for the average studio in the YC. That would be a quarter of their cash flow. I think to your point, Terry, this goes back to what we originally said. What's the actual problem?
yeah,
Very often, even a lack of cash flow or a lack of capital is a symptom of a different problem. A little bit less so capital usually, because you can access that in a lot of different ways. But the lack of cash flow is a symptom of, go to your KPIs. You don't have enough people on MRR. Well, why don't you have enough people on MRR? Well, it's either not enough people coming in, or you're not getting people to your conversion through your conversion funnel,
converting them. Yeah. What's the real problem?
or both of those things, right? And then to the studio owner side, if you're like, oh, actually, I just want someone else to like bear some of the weight of the business because I'm burnt out, I can't do more, I'm having trouble expanding the business, like I'm not able to grow the business anymore within the hours of work effort that I'm putting in. This is what we talked about a lot at the summit, like tough love time. You're working on the wrong shit then.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you're busy. Absolutely.
But you're busy doing the wrong things.
You must be doing the wrong thing then. If nothing is building the business up and you're having a cash flow problem, or your KPIs are showing something, like, what are you working on to fix that? And if it's not all of your effort, then what else are you doing? Like sometimes it's that simple to be said, simpler said than done.
Well,
but
and we hear this a lot. It's like it's maybe not hear it, but we see and hear they don't want to give up control. It's like nobody's going to be able to do it as well as I can, or it's easier for me to do it than train somebody to do it, which is a really pretty piss poor way to run your business, because then you're never going to be able to grow it. It's like we see that, it's like, oh, well, I was talking to somebody actually at this summit about this. And I'm like, you as the owner with their team in place should not be doing this. Period. End of story at this point. And really what it came down to was they were fearful of turning something over, and maybe there was a trust issue there. Well, if you have trust issues, then do you have the right team in place? These are all things that like you said, what is the underlying problem? It might, you think it's this, but when you really start peeling back the layers, you get down to it, it's not that at all. It's something completely different.
Carol, I know you commented on this, like going through that transition as an owner, where like you want to maintain control of certain things, and then at some point you change and have to delegate it. How did you do that? How did you make that shift?
Well, SOPs. I mean, that was the biggest thing. Like write it all down and teach somebody and give them grace to learn it. And I had a student a long time ago who he's very successful in the area and owned a few movie theaters actually. And he said to me one day, like, I found myself cleaning the toilets. Like he was like, then it clicked with him. Same thing we've always said before. If I can get somebody else and I can pay somebody and it's at least 80% of what I would do, then that's good because it frees me up to do the other things that are more important. And I heard that way back 20 years ago. Did I put it fully in place right away? No, but it always stuck with me. And I mean, there were, we did end up hiring desk people, and like there were definitely things that were handed over, but some of the bigger things I waited on probably too long to do that. Um, but yeah, it's SOPs are the way to go, and so having some kind of checklist and a way to measure progress and track these things being done was huge. So
Yeah.
I just had to like give it up.
And this also videos, Loom videos or videos on your phone. It's like, I know it's a silly thing. I think it's silly, but maybe it's not. I shouldn't say that. I bet retract, rewind. I know, and a lot of times
Edit.
edit, cut, edit is that some people are very particular about how towels are folded. Well, I saw a whole demo when we were at Josh's on how he folds his t-shirts. Okay, there's a very specific way he wants his t-shirts folded so that they stack a certain way, right? And I get that, particularly if, so guess what? And we were at a studio last year where the owner was still putting the bottled water away from the delivery because he wanted it put away a very, very specific way. And we're like, dude,
Yeah, what are we talking about?
what are we talking about? So what do? We filmed a video. This is how this goes. So that's the other thing is if there's things that you need to be done, I actually made a video of how to clean a toilet
Yeah,
because I
sure.
realized that the young woman I hired as my first friend, where the heck was her mother? Her mother, I couldn't believe nobody trained this kid how to clean a toilet. And right. And so I did it. This is how you clean the toilet. This is how you clean the sink. This is how, all those kind of things make it,
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely made how to fold towel videos for sure in
Yeah.
my studio.
How to roll the mats. That was one of the first things we do on a hire. We'd train them. They would have an SOP for it. And then the next couple of training shifts, I would go in and the mats would be folded wrong, or they wouldn't be up to the standard. Like they didn't get all the corners to line up or whatever. And I'd be like, cool, take every single mat out.
And redo it.
Let's do it again right now. No problem. Like nothing, no attack on you as a person, but like this is the standard and it's going to be like this. And this is how you do it. But I'm not going to do it. Like it's actually if I was to come in and just be like, these are wrong and do it myself, that would be passive aggressive. That's not empowering for someone else. So I'm going to help you be able to do it.
Yeah.
The thing that comes to mind with this SOP comment too is like, this is an element of working on the right thing, right? Where it's like, let's suppose the problem is first visit retention at your studio. Temporarily and in the beginning, if you don't have the team around you or you need to train, you will have to be there at the desk working on that because that's the highest impact thing you can do.
Yeah. Short term.
And at some point, you have to transition that to be, and as I'm doing it, I need to build the system, the SOP, the strategy, and then I need to find the person who I can train on it so that then I can delegate it to them so that then it's still happening, but it's not me necessarily that's doing it. That's working on the right thing. So you're still solving the one single problem, but there's multiple things to work on associated with that single problem versus an owner comes in and they're like, okay, well, I focus on that. And then our first visit retention rate went up, but then they didn't put any of the other stuff in place. And they're like, well, then I had to work on this. And then, oh, I don't have enough time because I can't do that and do this. And you're like, right, because you're working on the wrong thing. It's more like the fullness, the follow through of building the whole system and solidifying something into your business. That's the part that didn't happen.
Yeah. Because we get distracted, particularly if it's something you don't like to do, right? We'll spend time doing the things we like to do. We've talked about this a lot too. It's like the procrastinate. It's like, because you're so busy, oh, I got to do all these other things because you feel good getting those things done. And maybe there's this big thing you just like, oh, I'll get to it. You keep kicking the can down the road. And that's where you get into trouble. And I also want to back up. I was going to say, I also want to back up to what you were talking about, the cash flow situation is, let's back all the way up as even, regardless of where you are in your business ownership, but whether you're brand new or been around, it's like, what are you actively doing to not only improve your cash flow, but also what are you doing to build your cash reserves? Because, because there's another element of that is that, and I think this was true when the pandemic first hit, I feel a lot of business, not just yoga studios, but a lot of businesses went under initially so quickly because they were already out of business. They just didn't know it. And the pandemic was their excuse to say, oh, it was because of the pandemic we shut down. When in reality, it's they've been going out of business for the previous 6 months to a year. Why? Because they had no cash reserves.
Mm.
Right. So what are you doing as an owner to build your cash reserves? And the general rule of thumb is you want to have a minimum of 3 months operating expenses in the bank. And if you're not there, build towards one. Get 1 month of cash reserves in the bank. And then you build it up so that in time, when you hit these cash things, you do have the cash reserves and you're not stressing financially.
The most interesting part, I did a video a while back on, it's called the Matthew effect. Because of, the Matthew effect, it comes out of the Bible.
Okay.
It's a phrase there, but the point is winners win. And it's a really interesting thought. We played the dice game, right, at the summit, where it's like, if I already have 6 dice and you have 1, and the goal is roll 1 more 6, I'm going to beat you. I've already won, so I will win more at first. Eventually it starts to even out because the only thing to do is keep rolling the dice. But the point would be winners win. And when we talk about things like cash flow is a good example of this. If you have 6 months of cash reserve on a profitable business that you're paying yourself in without some massive credit card debt or something like that, you won't even ever need to fucking use the money because you'll go to the bank and they'll give you anything you want. And it would actually be silly to use your cash at that point because it's probably cheaper to take a term loan for a one-time investment or to end up with a different credit system, a rolling credit system, like a credit line or whatever. It'd be a better use for cash flow, or that's where you get a super credit card at that point and you're running a 30-day cash flow system off of a couple of credit cards.
That's the other thing you just said too, is line of credit. Having a line of credit in place is another good way. You might not need it, but if you do get in that situation where you like all of a sudden something happens, your heater goes out or something like that, big thing is if you have a line of credit already ready to go, and typically there's no charge for it. You only charge, like I had a SBA line of credit on the business, and I used it once and paid it off, and then it just was there. So that's another thing. I also just Google it. The Matthew effect is a phenomenon where people with advantages tend to accumulate more of those advantages over time. It is also known as the Matthew, and it's from Bible verse Matthew 25:29, which says, "He who has much will give more, and he who has little will have even that taken from him."
Yep.
It's really kind of the spirit of reciprocity. It's like you get what you give, you get. Karma, baby.
Well, and there's a law of attraction undertone written into this. The Bible term, you could read it, we could just dissect that all day, but like it's Yeah, once you're winning, it's easier to keep winning. And there's quite a few reasons for this. Part of it is like a psychological reason, it's a confidence reason, right? Going back to the dice game, for those of you who missed it, we played a game where we had two people at the summit. One person had one dice and one person had six dice. And the game is each of you roll and you're trying to roll a six. And if you roll a six, you get another dice. That's it. That's the whole game. So then you roll and then you roll again and you roll again. And on the first roll, the person with one dice doesn't roll a six. So they roll one dice again. The person with six dice, 1 in 6 chance, they roll a six. So they get another dice. Now they have 7. So like they start gaining at first. Now, eventually, this person rolling one does start to get more. So the point of that was to just say, all you can do is roll the dice. You can't compare yourself to someone who's just ahead of you, right? That's how you'll catch up eventually. But if you have 10 dice, 12 dice in your hand, how confident are you that you're going to roll a six? Which means if you were to roll and you didn't roll a six, if I rolled 12 dice and I didn't roll a six, I would actually be surprised that I didn't win.
Yeah.
Therefore, I would be like, that's weird. I should win because I'm a winner. And I would just pick them all up and roll again immediately. Versus you roll one dice, you're like, well, not surprising. I didn't win because I only have one dice. It's not my fault. I didn't have a chance to win. It's unfair that Terry has 12 dice over there.
Life's
And you're
not fair.
spending all right. You're spending all the time kind of complaining to yourself about how you only have one dice. In the meantime, you could have rolled 3 more times.
Yeah. Here's it, and it just is fascinating. I'm going to say this. It says massive effects can be seen in many areas of life, including for those parents out there, which you might already know. It's like students who start out with strong literacy skills tend to continue to do well, while those who start out poorly tend to do worse. And it's like that whole thing. It's like you start out strong kind of thing. It's just really fascinating.
Yep.
I mean, yeah.
There's a little bit of a tangent, but it is related to this. Sports are kind of interesting to me now, specifically hockey, because I played hockey. Not really because I give much of a shit about hockey, like as a sport, but the skill level's at an all-time high. But the one thing that's super unique now versus when I played is how much data there is. They track everything now. No one tracked anything other than goals and assists and time on the ice when I played. And then now they track how much time a player spends in which zone of the ice, the percentage of times they score from which zone inside, what type of shot is it for to backhand? Is it on a fast break versus a set play? Like they track all of this shit now. It's kind of crazy. But it's fascinating to look at that because that data impacts the behavior of the game. The players know this now, so it changes what they do and how they play. One of the major data points is like 75-80% of the NHL are people who were born in the first quarter of the year.
I was just going to say that. It said children who are born later in the year may be at a disadvantage when playing
Yes,
children who are born earlier in the year.
always, because in hockey, along with other sports,
Yeah.
but if I'm born in January and you're born in December, the cutoff is January 1 for which league we're in. So
Right.
your whole life, I'm playing 12 months in front of you.
Yeah.
And when you're 13, which is when I got drafted into the WHL, 12 months at 13 is a huge fucking difference.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
a different human being. And then again, later on, when you're in that like 16, 17-year-old range,
Same thing.
if I'm 16 and you're at the end of 17, like for some boys, that's like a man versus a child. You know what I'm saying? So like it's a huge, and then it compounds itself because later in life, someone with an older, later birth date in the year would catch up physically and it would have no advantage anymore. But in the meantime, your entire hockey career coming up, you've always played on the best team. You've always got more ice time. You've always seen the best coach. Like you had all these advantages. So, anyways, to me, that's like a perfect example of this Matthew effect thing where it's not actually because the birth date itself makes a better human being, but it's like you start winning and then it's this compounding effect.
Wow. How did we? Wow.
I don't even know how we got here.
I don't either. It's just
Hockey.
hockey.
Hockey just ends up in play a little stick and puck, you know?
Pick and puck. It is, well, what you said about the statistics and stuff, I do feel that has, there's so much more information now, and what do we do with it, and all that kind of stuff. It's like mind numbing and mind blowing. And at the same time, I see this as sometimes I see this with KPIs. It's like, wanting to get too down in the weeds with some of the data, which can have its uses. However, it's like, keep it simple when it comes to certain things. Keep it simple, particularly if you're not a CFO or you don't have a background in finance and all that kind of stuff. Is just keep it simple, know what your numbers are, and if there's just a few key data points, then that's good.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a good recommendation. Data is empowering. We're in the digital era, which is also the era of data. It's the most valuable resource on the planet.
It's only valuable if you know what to do with it.
It's
And
only valuable if you do something with it.
how
And
you
so
harness it.
it itself can actually be the distraction. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's the point is the data becomes the distraction, because it's
Yeah.
like, we got to get this down to the nth degree. And I personally look at it like this. I had a conversation with a client yesterday about money and finances and things not lining up and blah blah blah. And it was like, you're spending too much time on this. The bottom line is that we're not Wall Street traders, and where 1/10% will could equate to hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, right? It's like, if it's not 100%, it's okay, because overall, if things are improving, I know I'm not articulating my point too well, but sometimes the data you get so far down the weeds that you lose sight. You lose sight of the forest for the trees kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, I would double down on that thought. Carol, I'll be curious what you think too, but like it kind of, I was on 2 podcasts yesterday, and one of them was a podcast about spas, and they were sort of asking me about yoga studios and the finances of it and some of the data points and et cetera, et cetera. And the sort of thing that happened, the little epiphany that I had was, I'm fucking 20 years into yoga business and we're still talking about how many people come in. Do you get them onto your fucking intro or not? Can you sell them onto your membership? Can you keep them on your membership? That's it.
And can deliver good product. Yeah.
Right. Like, of course, there's more to it than that in the finer detail. But when we're talking about the data,
that's it.
If that's not working, everything goes to shit. Just so when in doubt, go back to that first, which sounds really boring. I know. He's like,
that's the thing. It's boring.
Yeah. People, I think, myself included, like, oh, I wish there was this new special secret data point I uncover, and then if I just do this and run this ad or whatever, then we make all this money. But like, that's not how it works.
There's no magic pill.
Yeah.
I think it runs the gamut with studio owners, the ones that have no clue, like they've never really looked or they're scared to look. And then, like you said, Terry, on the other end of that, there might be somebody that's like, this like is fascinating to me and I love to do it, but it's keeping them busy, but not actually working on something that's going to help improve the business. So I think it's sort of like figuring that out. Like, am I spending too much time here? Or can I kind of zoom out a little bit and see the bigger picture? And you guys, going back to like just the negative cash flow every month and that being the reason why you would need an investor. Like, I always kind of think of it like an open wound where you just keep putting, like, we see this a lot. People just put a Band-Aid on, I'll do an annual sale or I'll card sale or whatever, without getting to the root. And you will continually do that until like you just, it bleed out, right? So I think you have to get deep enough into those numbers to figure out where your focus should be, and then you can actually heal that. Because I think it's a little bit overwhelming to hear somebody say, oh my God, I need 3 to 6 months worth of operating expenses in my account, and like, how do you even get there? But it starts with really identifying the problem, cleaning it up, And then, like you said, like then there's the SOP, like it's like you can build and then pull out and see the whole body, the business, in that sense to make it right. So
Yeah.
but really getting to the root, you have to do that first. And I think you're right to ask the question, like, why do you need this investor? And then if it's a cash flow issue, let's clean up that wound. And it can take a while. I feel like I was there, like it took me a minute to figure out like we were really successful and then we weren't, like we did this kind of situation. And then it's sort of like figuring out that monthly recurring revenue was the most important thing. And then I just could focus there first. You have to let all those other distractions go. But once that was in place, and we always had enough in our operating account too, like I was very conservative with that. But I think that's where like you have to clean up the wound, like I said, and just sort of then pull out and zoom out to the bigger picture. And I don't know where I'm going with that now at this point, but
I think that's a great analogy, because as you said, if you're negative cash flow, you get an infusion of cash. If you haven't fixed the problem, guess what?
You're just going to burn through the cash.
You're just going to burn through the cash. So it's like you said, it's like, what is the actual problem? And and what are you going to do to fix it? And that might mean you have to change your thinking on certain things and be willing to do different things and be willing, what is the definition of sanity? Doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result, right? Be willing to make wholesale changes that might piss some people off, right?
Or it might just be hard work.
Or might be hard work. And you might get some people to complain and all of this stuff, and by doing it, is it going to yield you a better result? Then yeah, it's going to be worth the work and the pain. And, like I have a client who's just like has only a 15-minute window between classes, and they're a very busy studio, and they get a lot of new people coming in, but they don't retain a lot of new people. And I've been saying you don't have enough time between classes. 15 minutes is not enough time if you're really going to have a high quality customer service experience, particularly with new clients. You got 40 people coming in, 40 people going out in 15 minutes. How can you?
Or you need a different staffing situation.
Or you need a difference, or something's got to change.
Yeah. Yeah, to Carol's point, it's like it's both things. I love that analogy. I think it's brilliant, because it's like you have to go deep enough into the numbers. You have to audit what's happening enough to really identify what actually is the core problem. It's why we say, 50% of solving a problem is being able to clearly articulate it. And then once you've got that, then don't let the numbers distract you anymore for a minute. Just do the work on that thing and like allow yourself to be super focused there. This is a good little bit of a segue to maybe the last thing we talk about today. One of the things that came up at the summit was measuring inputs instead of outputs. And so KPIs and the numbers of your business, those are outputs. They're a result, but you're always looking in hindsight. So what do you measure in real time? Well, you measure inputs. So the example would be, I'm getting to content creation here. If you know that from your KPIs, the thing that is blocking the growth of your business the most is getting new people in the doors of your business. So then that's your big domino. You want to increase first visits average per month from 50 to 100. Okay. Then you would say, what's the strategy for how we achieve that? Of which one of them absolutely is content creation. I call it content creation because distribution, like which social media channel, whatever else, that's completely secondary. It's just building the content first. So content creation is the strategy. The detailed tactics of that are, well, I want to have a long form piece of content and 6 short form pieces of content minimum every week. So there's 7 pieces of content per week that I need to have created. Okay. So then how do you do that? And that's what you're building. That's the SOPs, the machine that you're building. The measurement then becomes not on like a weekly or monthly basis. did I increase my first visits from X to Y? The measurement is, did I produce the 7 pieces of content and get them out? Yes or no? At least to start, it's the input part. Am I actually putting the effort in to get 7 pieces of content built this week, like I said I was going to? And then that's the starting point, because the reason for this is then you can move down the line on where to focus. So once you have things rolling and you're producing that 7 pieces of content a week, then you can say, okay, now is the content good? Like, now should I make better content? Is it getting the reaction I want? What content is or isn't working? But like, you can't even do that in the beginning and worry about that until you start producing the content. You need something to measure. Then you have some good pieces of content. Then you're like, okay, well, now can we go from 7 to 14? If 7 pieces of content is good and getting this reaction, let's double it.
Or
Then you start measuring and saying like, okay, cool, we're producing all this content and putting it out, and it's been 3 to 6 months of time. Now what's actually happening in my KPIs? Do I have more people coming in the doors? Yes, I do. Cool. And they're reporting that they're seeing this stuff. It's working. Stay the course.
I was also going to say, and then once you've got the content going, looking at, and once you start pumping it out, then you can look at the metrics of the content and say, oh, this is performing, this type of content for us is performing really well, whereas this isn't. So then that helps you refine. And maybe if you don't have the bandwidth or time to increase your content by 50%, it's like, oh, now we know this is the content that does really well, right? And then for those of you, when Josh said long form content, just for reference, if you're not sure what that means, is that long, and we did this, it was so much fun, we can talk about that, is long form content, written content is anything basically over like 1,000 words. So it'd be like a longer blog post, or if you're doing something like a podcast, something that's longer, like 25, 30 minutes as opposed to the little snippets. But we did this at the, after the summit, Josh and I and Mara, we spent a day doing content. We created content, and it was really fun. And we took that idea and we did a long form, we did short form, and then we did really snippets, right? So it was
like
micro. So it was the same premise for the content, was basically the theme of the content was the same. It's just we did a longer, and it was really fun to do as well. Yeah.
Let's talk about that, because I think so. When we're talking about content creation, how do you actually produce a volume of content? I'm saying 7 pieces a week as an example. If anyone's listening to this, don't attach to that as saying like this is
what we have to do.
This is Bible for what you have to do or whatever. It's just it's the path of success, like anything, right? Consistency, frequency, accuracy, intensity, in that order. So first, you want to build some sort of a machine or plan where you can consistently produce content. Start looking at a way bigger time horizon. If you are going to commit to, I'm going to do content as part of marketing for my business, even a quarter is too short. You got to commit to a year. Like, that's what you've got to be looking at this. And because it'll change your perspective on what you're building and how fast you move. If you say, I'm committing to producing content every week for at least the next 12 months or 3 years, right? Then if you didn't get a piece of content out this week, it's not really that upsetting. That's not a pass fail, because you're like, I'm building a machine that spits content out every week. Then you do frequency, and to which, because someone will ask the question, yes, a daily piece of content would be a good place to shoot for. If you really want to go for it, you can go higher frequency than that. You almost can't go too much the way algorithms work right now. It's highly unlikely. In any case, how do you produce content on a regular? It's really hard to make 7 pieces of content on 7 different subjects in 7 different ways. Like, every piece of content is a large effort at that point. So usually it's a work smarter, not harder question, where one concept might have multiple points associated with it and might be able to be formatted in a few different ways. and might be able to be edited in a few different ways. So a great example would be, you mentioned a podcast. If you did a video podcast, and honestly, I've said this a few times recently. I think I said at the summit, I think every yoga studio should have a podcast, like a video podcast specifically. It's just comparatively easy from a content creation standpoint.
We
I
just
don't know
sat
why you
down.
wouldn't.
Yeah, when we did ours, Josh and I just sat on the couch, sat in his office, and just talked. I mean, basically,
That's all a podcast is.
this is the Weekly Roundup. Basically, is a video podcast in a way.
We could totally launch this as a podcast. In fact, we probably should. Shit, we got to take our own advice now. Yeah. But the idea would be, okay, we record the roundup, or you do a video podcast, and it's an hour long. Well, that's a long form piece of content. You could transcribe it and edit it. That's a blog post piece of content. Within this roundup, we've talked about 3 or 4 different subjects. So you could cut those out. Those are like your mid-length, like 5 to 10 minute slot pieces, like clips that you put out. And then there's got to be at least 5 1 minute or shorter little nuggets to pull out of here. So just editing alone, one piece of content just became 10, right? So that's the machine that you're building. Same concept, and Terry and I did this too. You're like, okay, well, let's talk about why stretching is good for you. Here's the 5 major points I want to make. So then you do a video talking about all 5 of those points. That's your long form. And then don't worry about the editing. Each one of those points is also its own video. So you've got a 10-minute video talking about 5 reasons why stretching is good for you. And then you have 5 1-minute videos talking about why stretching is good for you. It's already conceptualized. You already know more or less what you're going to say. But because you're filming 2 separate videos, you'll say it slightly different. And people, marketing is an exercise in memorization. People need to see something or hear something a few times. So even if and this doesn't happen, but even if one person saw every one of those pieces of content twice, it still doesn't matter.
People like to repeat stuff. I mean, just look at reruns and people restreaming and doing this and that. I mean, yeah, ad nauseum.
And the number of times my kid will watch one TikTok. He'll just watch it over and over here.
Right.
Oh my God, I am always blown away, but there are some content creators out there that are absolutely hysterical, and they're so clever and doing simple things, and then just the way they spin it is just amazing. I mean, I follow this young woman, and she did a post on a content thing on I should find it about forms, like Word docs versus this, and she did a character, and each character was like a Word doc was a PNG, and then the AI guy comes in and they like, oh, we don't like AI. This whole hysterical take on the different formats of extensions, of file extensions, right? I mean,
Yeah.
It was hysterical. I gotta find that.
Yeah, I know exactly who you're talking about. The AI comes in, they're all like, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, so the point being, how do you batch content? Batching is the thing that we were going to talk about.
I had a great idea before you go to batching. You could have here's an idea for the yoga studios, right? Each one of you could be with this idea. You get a couple of people, you're all different postures, and you represent like standing head to knee versus standing bow, or versus warrior 2, warrior 3. And then you kind of talk about, well, I do this in my posture, and that's why holy smokes, wouldn't that be super fun?
That'd be hilarious. And then it would be Cobra. Cobra would walk in.
Cobra
People
would
be
walk
like, oh, Cobra's
Cobra.
here.
That would be Carol. Carol would be the Cobra because she comes in so quietly and just very does her posture kind of thing. Oh my God.
No, wait. No, Carol would end the video. She'd roll in and she'd be like, hot Pilates, anyone? And all the yogis would be like, fucking hot Pilates here. Oh my God. We got to find the video and post it down below because no one knows what we're talking about.
Oh my God. I will find it. And I'll post it in the recap section. I'll add a post. But that would be hysterical. Somebody's got to take that idea and run with it. Okay, so going back to batching. Josh?
How do you batch? Well,
How do you
here's your
batch?
crash. Here's your crash course conceptually, right? Just realize that ideation of what you're going to do and scripting and then filming and then editing and then distributing are different things. They're different tasks. It's the reason why people hire someone for social media and then become frustrated with the person, because you didn't realize that you hired 4 people. You hired one person to do 4 jobs. And so the person you hired might be good at a couple of them, but not all of them. So when you're going to batch content, the idea of batching is like, rather than trying to produce a piece of content every day, free time block time to produce content, but even more so, separate these things out. Now, it could still be in one day, but if you are like, oh, today's Friday, it's content day, and then you sit down and you have to come up with a concept and come up with a script and get all ready to film and then film it and then edit it and then try to post it, like, you're going to hate yourself at the end of the day. It's like, it's actually really stressful. And you have to like change your mental state to do that all the way through, right? So I think that it makes more sense to do something to the effect of, you have a conceptualization moment, and then you have a creation moment, and then you have a distribution moment, an edit and distribution moment. And ideally, those are separate. They could be different people altogether.
Yeah.
And if you're really building the machine smart, that's how I would do it. That's actually how we do it. So you sit down once a quarter with your team and come up with 100 ideas for content. And then you sit down once a week and you pick 3 ideas and like go for a walk and just think about what they are. And then the next day you spend 3 hours filming them. That's exactly what we did when Terry was here. We already had the ideas, more or less. We went for a walk, Mara filmed, and we just walked and talked and filmed, I don't know how many videos. And the fun part about that is that because we weren't thinking about like what we're trying to do or what the concepts were in like a major way, then your creativity comes back in. Because I can't wait till we see some of these videos actually, Terry, because I'm pretty sure we had some wild shit.
We did.
This b-boy Terry walking. I was Terry's hype man. She's like doing a film. I'm in the background like, what? As we're just walking around.
It was fun. It was fun. It was a fun day.
So
Yeah.
batching content. Yeah.
And that's the other thing is like pick a day where you do it, because it really is true. That's why we have like our Excel week is when you're creative, it's a different part of your brain. And so it's hard to go from like, well, teaching, whatever you're doing at your studio, like for me, like doing a coaching call, being all of that, and then trying to be creative with a post or something like that. I find I do much better. We've talked about this is like when you have that time to do that deep focus work, and that's what you're working on. Sure, you can do the little one off, but to do something like this, block it out on your calendar where that's where you're doing your creative stuff. It's different than like doing your KPIs, right? Because that's a different part of the brain. But yeah, we've talked about that before.
Carol, talk to us about creating content, because I think one of the things that you, and obviously let you speak for yourself, but that you highlight is, I actually do better creating content if I have a concept and some bullets, and then I just kind of off the cuff do it a couple times in a row. That's a better flow for me, but you have expressed that that doesn't work for you.
No, I like to have, well, it depends on what it's about. I think that's part of it. So, like when I was doing, say, a posture breakdown for the studio, I was really simple and I did one monthly, was just like, there's 26 postures, right? So I just started every month. I would just do, um, at first I was doing one. I think I could probably have done a couple at a time, but also I needed to let go of the perfectionism because nobody was really editing them. It was just like a one take thing. So I would now, knowing what I know now, I would have probably filmed it a little bit differently and done editing instead of trying to get it in one take, because that's what took me a long time, actually. But then when it's something that's not a posture breakdown or like a physical movement type of thing, I preferred to have a script. And there are really cool little apps that you can put on your phone or tablet or whatever that it's literally filming you, and you can have what you want to say just scrolling through like a teleprompter. And that's really helpful for me when I need that kind of guidance. And I don't necessarily say exactly what's on there either. Sometimes it is sort of goes off the cuff, but at least I have all the bullet points right there in the order that I need. And I don't know, that has always helped me.
Yeah.
I like that. We use the teleprompter when Terry was here for one video. I have a couple teleprompter apps. Like, yeah, that's a great way to do it if that feels the most empowering for you. I think the other thing, reading between the lines of what you're talking about with the postures too, it's like if you're teaching the yoga postures all the time, you know the yoga postures and you've seen 1,000 bodies in a yoga posture. So then you're comfortable speaking about it. Why are you comfortable speaking about it? Well, because it's practiced.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important detail to just be aware of. So first off, like, what's the lesson from that? Talk about what you're comfortable talking about. Don't overcomplicate it to begin with. You can talk about postures, cool, talk about that. But also, anything that's more practice, you're going to get more comfortable talking about. So content creation in general, I think that having a little trust in yourself that like you're going to just get way better at it. Like you'll get more efficient. It'll be easier. Your brain will be faster at making it happen. Like, I don't know, creating content I wouldn't say that it's easy. I wouldn't say that it's hard. It's something that it's just like any other skill, needs to be practiced a little bit.
The more you do it, the better you get.
Mm-hmm.
And more comfortable, particularly if you're not comfortable making a complete fool of yourself in front of, the entire world on the internet. And, some of us have no problem doing that.
No cringe. I saw a brilliant post actually recently that it was obvious, but it hit home for me. They were saying, how do you get over cringe? Like getting over your own cringe. Be like, oh, I'm scared of making this or whatever else. And the deeper like fear of judgment stuff aside, what we're talking about is like, oh, it's cringy when I did this thing. And if you have a son, my son's age or Carol's son's age, you know what I'm talking about. It's like, Mom, that's so cringy. Like, Dad, it's so cringy. I'm like, get out of here. Anyways, how do you get over cringe? Stop judging anyone else's stuff as cringy. And I was like, oh shit, that's really true. Like when you first start and have a lot more cringe awareness on yourself, you also look for it. Like you look at content and you're like, oh, this is that. I don't want it to be like that. Or like you're like judging how it looks, how content looks in general, instead of thinking about it like these are human beings who are just fucking producing content and putting it out there and have the guts to do that. And the ones that you like are the ones that like show up kind of authentically. Like we're in that moment for content creation. So
It's making me think of, I just saw a video with Stephen Colbert, and he was talking about his time, in his improv group. And they're like, what did, some memory that I don't know, he wanted to bring up. And he's like, what I learned was you fall in love with the bomb when you're doing improv. And he's like, so it's kind of relating to this in a way. Like he's like, if it's a great show, then you're like, oh great, everyone's enjoying this. But if it's a bomb, you kind of love it too, because you're like, wow, this is really terrible, and we're just gonna keep going. And so just sort of falling in love with like the imperfection, I guess, and going with it is the moral there.
Yeah.
I like that. Like, this is awkward, and I'm going to stand right in it.
I love it there. I follow this content guy. He's like 6'7" gay guy. He's just hysterical, and he's always shug because he lives in the South. And he was doing a video on Thanksgiving. He had Paula Deen, those of you who know, I'm dating myself, talking about a dry rub on, she's doing about you got to rub your meat. You got to get into all the cricket. And he's like going, And then there's a voice in the back. I mean, it was just like his reactions were absolutely hysterical because she's like rubbing the meat. It's just like, oh my God, I left the one I was peeing my pants. It was just brilliant. I don't know. I just thought of that. He's just hysterical.
Well, that's a good example of authenticity, I think. Like
Yeah.
the ideation of that tells you something about that person. They're like, well, this is funny. Like, this is who I am, and I find this funny, and I'm gonna show up and just fucking post this,
Yeah. Yeah. He did a post right after, without going down any rabbit holes. He did a post after the election here in the United States, and he was in his bathtub, and he said, "Some days, Shook, you just have to put on your bubble bath hat." And he had all this bubbles on his hat, and he was surrounded by bubbles. And he had some. He said, "Sometimes, Shook, you just have to take a good bubble bath." Right. And it was just, that's all he was saying. It was just so hysterical and just sort of, at least for me, sort of spot on. It's like sometimes you do just have to go take a bubble bath and just tune the world out. Right. Again, it was super funny. It was just hysterical.
I think one of the things that you're highlighting well here, Terry, is like, authenticity is a word that gets thrown around a lot, but like, what is that? What is authenticity? Without going down that rabbit hole too much, part of it from a content creation standpoint is relatability. And so when we're thinking about for a yoga studio or a wellness business, trying to create content that is attractive and magnetic so that people know, like, and trust you, and ultimately are like, I'm going to take a look at the actual business and coming in and participating with you. Being authentic is like being your true self and just putting that thing out there, the bubble bath shot or whatever
Yeah.
else, because it's you.
Yeah.
And that's the scary part, but it's also the most attractive thing you can do because it becomes relatable. The person who relates to that or finds that funny, then now we're talking about this person's channel, you know?
Yeah.
The person who doesn't and is like, I don't like that, then just scrolls to the next thing. Who cares? It's not for them. But from a business perspective, same thing. Put out some yoga stuff and you're talking about whatever, meditation, spiritualism, stretching, fitness. It's an authentic take, and it's really you and your knowledge and expertise. Someone else can not like it. That's just fine. It doesn't matter. Or someone else can think it's cringy. Like,
Right.
screw them. Don't worry about it. Because that means someone likes it and someone will be attracted to it. And someone will think that it's there. So there is an element of just like, be yourself and put it out there, because that's the most relatable stuff. And we're in a moment where that's what hits right now. It's not high produced. It's relatability that gets attention. It's not high production stuff, content.
Yeah.
Okay. Batch some content. Don't take on an investor unless you need to. Do your KPIs.
Your KPIs.
solved all the
That's all. That's
solved
it.
all the world's problems again.
Yep. And make
Piece of cake.
SOPs. And
Make SOPs.
make your SOPs.
Yep. Simple.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think we've covered it today.
All right. Leave us a comment down below. What do you think? Are you producing content? I mean, on the regular, do you have a production plan for creating content and spitting out content at XYZ frequency at whatever time frame? Do you actually have that? Is that machine built? Or even trying to build it? What's going on? I'm really curious, actually, to hear from some studios about how they're approaching this. What I'm seeing coaching is no one's doing it.
Hey, maybe that could be, we could do a like our marketing calendar workshop, which people have been saying they got really good stuff out of it. Maybe we should have a content calendar workshop.
Yeah, totally. That's a good idea, actually. Content creation workshop.
I think we should.
All right, go do some yoga.
Go do some yoga, go do some content. And I want to see anybody who does a video short or whatever on everybody has a different character of a posture. I think that would be hysterical. And And what posture would you act?
Oh, I'm going to post it. We should post it in the Mighty Network right now.
Okay.
What posture are you?
What posture are you?
If you were a yoga posture,
If
what
you were
posture
a
would you
yoga
be?
posture, what posture would you be?
Oh my gosh. I got to think on this one.
All right, I'm gonna post it. I'll post it. If you were a yoga posture, what posture would you be?